I have a lot of things to talk about when it comes to what you need to know about physical education for your child with a disability. So I'm just going to run right through this. So a couple of goals for tonight or some things I'd like you to walk away with. Three items. Um, Understanding how physical education is connected to IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is educational law that provides free, appropriate, and public education for kids with disabilities. We'll also talk about how specially designed instruction, which often is referred to adapted physical education, is a part of the special education process. And we'll talk a little bit about how students would be eligible for adapted PEATC services. And then finally, I'll share a whole bunch of different resources connected to some things that I may or may not have talked about more in detail tonight that you can learn more offline, and how you might advocate in your particular school and your child's school when it comes to adapted PE and physical education services. So a little bit more about me. My name is Adam Forbes. I've been in the scope of adapted physical education for quite a while. In Virginia, I was a former adapted PE teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools, where I had worked with a number of students with disabilities in a number of different schools from elementary, middle, and high school. Currently, I'm a professor at Norfolk State University, teaching health and physical education courses. We do have one adapted PE course as part of our course requirements, which I'll talk about when it comes to um, the qualifications of providing AP services. Also in Virginia, there's a state organization, Virginia's Adapted Physical Education Consortium, which is a newer organization, I would say 3 or 4 years now. I serve as the executive director, where we focus on supporting teachers, parents, administrators, any individuals and students as well when it comes to adaptive PE services or adaptive physical activity. Also, we have a national organization, which is the National Consortium of Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities. I serve as the website manager, but that national organization is also a part of supporting a whole bunch of different stakeholders when it comes to providing and serving individuals with disabilities through physical education. And then finally, in Virginia, there is a Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. And I see education is spelled incorrectly, but I serve as the adaptive PE chair, supporting the organization when it comes to adaptive PE services, but also at the same time supporting teachers when it comes to um, students that are receiving adaptive PE services. So just a little bit about me, but we'll get into tonight's session. I had organized tonight's session into different questions that I've heard of from other parents, and my research is tied to the parental and adaptive PE teacher relationship. So the first question is, my child can receive PE. And so we'll try to answer that question, connecting it back to IDEA and Virginia State Code. So we'll start with the definition of special education. And I'm sure you've heard of it already if your child has been receiving these services for over the years. But special education is special design instruction, and that's at no cost to you as the parent. And that is meeting the unique needs of your child with a disability. And that could be occurring in the classroom setting, home setting, hospital, and other settings. So, kind of looking at this face value, and in my experiences, usually most folks understand special education as this definition. But IDEA also has a secondary definition that special education also includes instruction in physical education. So what this means is special education or physical education is special education, meaning that PE is a direct service that students are required to receive within IDEA and under special education. And we'll talk a little bit more about physical education and specifically answering that if your child can receive PE. So if we're looking at the Code of Virginia, which is specific to our state, it has a similar definition of special education. And as you can see, it does have instruction in physical education. So in IDEA, in the Code of Virginia, has PE as part of a child's special education, meaning that is a required service that students must be afforded when it comes to their special education. And IDEA also defines what PE means. And when it comes to that, it's the development of physical and motor fitness. It's connected to teaching students fundamental motor skills. So when it comes to movement patterns in a physical education setting, that could be um, students learning about spatial awareness, how their body is in space when it comes to different movement patterns. They're learning different motor skills when it comes to participating and engaging in aquatics, dance, sports, individual or group games, all connected to lifetime physical activity and recreation. And also PE, which, as we said, is a special education service, also includes special physical education, adapted physical education, which we'll talk more about, movement education, and motor development. And what this is saying is that PE and also adapted PE are special education services, and they are required and must be afforded for your child to receive these services. And if we're looking at special education is specially designed instruction, so we're going to define what specially designed instruction is, and that's focused on the particular content, the methods, and the delivery, and adapting that to meet the unique needs of each child within special education. And it's to ensure that the child has access to the general curriculum, which in this case would be the physical education curriculum, and that the child is meeting those educational standards. And in Virginia, there's both health and physical education standards of learning. So when it comes to special design instruction, that physical education is meeting this requirement under IDEA. And also, IDEA does ensure and also require that each state, so that includes Virginia, and public agencies, so school districts, um, are in compliance with the following. So physical education, which we said is a special education service, and special design if necessary, so that includes adaptive PE, must be made available to every child with a disability that's receiving free, appropriate, and public education. And then there is a parentheses and a caveat, unless that school district or that public agency doesn't enroll children without disabilities and doesn't provide that physical education in that same grade level. So, for example, in Virginia, PE is required from kindergarten all the way to 10th grade. So, if we're looking at preschool and looking at 11th and 12th grade, those aren't required, and students aren't without disabilities aren't receiving physical education. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about that caveat in tonight's session. Part of that is states must also ensure that students are receiving physical education and with their non-disabled peers, and they must afford those opportunities. Unless the student is enrolled in a full-time separate facility or the child needs specially designed PE, which we talked about was adaptive physical education, and it's also documented as an area of need in their child's IEP. And if we're looking more closely at special physical education, um, and this is just a reiteration that if it is documented on a child's IEP that they require specially designed PE, the public agency, they must provide those services directly. Or if they cannot, they must make arrangements for those services to be provided. So school can't say, yeah, we're not doing PE, or we don't have the resources for it. We don't have the personnel for it. If it's on the child's IEP and they require special designed PE, the public agency still needs to meet that requirement and they still need to provide those services or make those arrangements. And if a child is receiving education in a separate facility, they public agencies still must be in compliance when it comes to ensuring the child receives appropriate PE in compliance with state mandated physical education. So going through a lot of different moving parts connected to IDEA, but just in summary, answering that question, my child can receive PE. The answer to that question is yes, my child is required to receive PE. And know that PE is a special education and is a required special education service. So it can't be something that the school district decide, no, we can't do it. We're going to decide not to provide that. They are required to provide that because it's a special education service. And if we're looking at Virginia, it's also a required PE service that schools are required to provide it. And if students require special designed instruction, and it's documented on the child's IEP, they are still required and must provide those opportunities and make arrangements for those services to be provided. So a follow-up to that, which is connected to the a couple of OSEP letters, which OSEP stands for Office of Special Education Programs, which is a uh, a national governmental organization that provides guidance and also provides interpretations of IDEA, and individuals, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a school staff member, any individual in the community can write a letter to OSEP and ask for some clarifications about IDEA and some interpretations or a situation that's happening within a school district. So this particular letter was James Irby, who was a lawyer in Alabama, and his school district, they were substituting PE with additional reading instruction. So he sent a letter to the U.S. Department of Education just to clarify, is this something that school districts can do? So can other subjects like reading or math or science substitute PE? And the short answer is no. If it's a state mandated physical education instruction, school districts and state must provide that for children with disabilities, and they cannot substitute PE because it is a required special education service. And I have a lot of QR codes, so you can scan that QR code. That'll take you directly to that policy letter. Another question that a parent might have is, so my child's in preschool or my child's in 11th and 12th grade, can they still receive PE? So there's two letters by Garth Tymerson and Luke Kelly clarifying this with the U.S. Department of Education of what IDEA says about this particular situation. And the short answer is yes. In both preschool and 11th and 12th grade, your child still can receive PE. So we talked about in Virginia that students that are receiving physical education is required in Virginia from kindergarten to 10th grade. But we talked about if your child has a unique need and they require specially designed PE, and it's also documented on their IEP, schools still must provide the services or make arrangements for them to be provided. So it doesn't matter if your preschool or the school that your child's at, and they're in a preschool and they don't receive PE. If it's documented that it's a unique need that they require physical education services, school districts still must provide or make arrangements. So preschool ages 3 to 5, 11th grade plus could be 16 to 21 years of age. So yes, the answer to this is yes. School districts still must provide that, and your child still can receive physical education. All right, so we answered the first question, which was a little bit lengthy. So we're getting into our second global question, which is, what is APE? What is adapted physical education? So we talked about that physical education, specially designed if necessary, is required under IDEA and is required special education service. So adapted physical education is also required, and specially designed instruction. We had defined specially designed instruction, which, if we're looking at adapted PE, is adapting the content, the method, the delivery of instruction to make sure that students are accessing the gen ed physical education standards of learning in Virginia, and they're also meeting those standards of learning. And to the right here, these are the standards of learning for physical education in Virginia. So students would be working towards in meeting these educational standards. So motor skills, energy balance, which is connected to nutrition, fitness planning, social emotional, and then self-health and relationship education. So one thing in my research that I have found is we could talk all about these things, but actually seeing it in action speaks a lot more louder than just talking about it. So we're going to watch 3 videos, short videos of what adapted PE looks like in the school setting. So this is a teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools, Matt Barker. He and I are great friends and close colleagues. He and I started at the same time in Fairfax, and he's done great things there. So this is just a quick snippet of this particular activity, and we'll kind of break down the skill as well.
Scarecrow, Rainbow, Rainbow, good job.
So I'll just pause it right here. But as you can see, just in terms of the setting, smaller group setting, you have some students that are working on different skills in that setting. You have a lot of teacher assistants that are supporting students. The person that said yay was the adaptive PE teacher, Matt Barker. And this particular activity was focused on using different visual supports, meeting the unique needs of the students, ensuring they have access to this particular educational standard, which was overhand throwing, as part of an elementary physical education curriculum. This next video is also another example of adapting the content, the instruction, the methodology when it comes to each individual student. So we'll watch this quick video. So if you've seen a regulation volleyball match, you can tell that the net is higher. You can tell that there is no table or any other surface that is supporting students. So this teacher, Matt Barker, had thought about this individual student, had thought about the educational standards of learning that he was trying to have the student achieve and work towards. And he provided that success when it comes to adapting this particular activity. Right. So the students working with a teacher assistant were working on a particular skill, which was striking, an activity where the student had that success in working towards those educational standards. The last one is basketball, which is working on a whole range of different skills. But this is just a great example of looking at each individual student and thinking about their strengths and areas of growth when it comes to meeting those educational standards. I'll just pause here, but you can see that this is a class that not everyone had the same ball. We're doing the same activity all at once. But as you can see, Matt Barker was thinking about each individual student, was thinking about their strengths, areas of growth, adapting the content, adapting the instruction. As you can see, everyone was dribbling, but they were dribbling in various ways that created that success for them to make sure that they're accessing the PE standards of learning and also ensuring that they're meeting those educational standards of learning for PE. All right, so we talked about what adaptive PE looks like. So the next global question is, does my child need adaptive PE services? So with any special education service or related service, it's going to start with a screening. So the screening is not an evaluation. It's not for eligibility. This is going to be an opportunity for um, the IEP team to determine what's the appropriate instructional strategies to create that success for that student who is accessing the regular physical education setting. So when it comes to physical education, that could be providing those instructional strategies to the PE teacher, who will be implementing those strategies to create those opportunities for that particular student to now meet those and ensure they're accessing the Gen Ed PE curriculum, and also at the same time that they are meeting those educational or working towards those educational standards of learning. And if through that screening process there is continued challenges or concerns when it comes to that child accessing and benefiting and having meaningfulness when it comes to that regular physical education setting, um, a referral for evaluation can occur. And this is a required part of the special education process. With any special education service, it's not automatic, yeah, this kid needs adaptive PE, but it needs to go through this process in order for the team to now make decisions, which includes you as the parent and the child as well when it comes to is adaptive PE services warranted. So this also uh, includes an IEP meeting to discuss the screening information and also informal additional data And any referral can happen from you as the parent. It could be from the school staff, IEP team member, the physical education teacher. That brings up some significant concerns when it comes to that child progressing in the regular physical education setting. And then from there, from the referral to the consent for the evaluation, all the way into the eligibility. In Virginia, it's 65 days for that, the whole entire process to complete into eligibility, and we'll get to that point. But after that, it's conducting the evaluation. So IDEA states that any evaluation is not going to just be one single measure. It's going to include a whole different moving parts. And as a part of that requirement is the student is going to be observed in a regular PE setting. So that's going to be a part of that evaluation. And also a part of that evaluation is going to include, not the special education teacher that's doing the evaluation, not the physical therapist, occupational therapist, but it's going to be um, um, the individual that has the appropriate training and also the adequate knowledge when it comes to providing this assessment. So that's going to be your physical education or adaptive PE teachers. So a part of that evaluation would include a gross motor assessment, and there's many out there that are connected to different movement patterns and movement skills that students will be learning within the physical education curriculum. So the test of gross motor development is an example. Peabody Development Motor Scales is another example. And those are norm referenced assessments. There's also an opportunity for informal assessments. So those two are more formalized, but informal assessments would also be gathered to provide a lot more information about the student. That could be connected to fitness concepts or skill related concepts like balance, moving in space. Maybe it's specific skills like catching, bouncing, dribbling. There would be a review of records, so prior assessments, eligibility meetings, a review of the IEP to gather more information about the student and their areas of need. And like I mentioned, an observation is required in the regular physical education setting. And then lastly, consultation from the IEP team, including you as a parent, when it comes to gathering more information about the student. So after that evaluation is complete, there would be an eligibility meeting to review that adaptive PE evaluation. And you as a parent would receive a copy of that evaluation to review. And the team would discuss and determine, does the student need adaptive PE services and supports to now have success and access and work towards those PE standards of learning. And if the team does decide, including you as the parent, that adaptive PE services are warranted, it would be included on the child's IEP. So these are the 5 things that should be included on your child's IEP. So adding a statement about your child's present level of academic achievement and functional performance that talks about the assessment, talks about the areas of growth, areas of need when it comes to accessing and working towards the PE standards of learning. Goal and objective for adaptive PE services, a yearly measurable goal that is having documentation that students are working towards those physical education standards of learning. And then also part of that is including the frequency and durations of services. So how many minutes or how many times a week is a child receiving adaptive PE services? Conversations about the least restrictive environment. So which particular setting where the student would be in their least restrictive environment. And then lastly would be accommodations. So what supports or strategies are going to be appropriate for the student when it comes to adaptive PE services. So as you can see, it's not just automatic, boom, students are going to receive AP services, but there is a process that should be followed. And the adaptive PE and physical education teacher is the most appropriate person to be a part of that process and the most knowledgeable when it comes to both conducting the eval and then also conversating about eligibility. So question 4 is an extension of that, but where will my child receive APE services? So this was a quick infographic that lays out not a very specific, but it kind of summarizes possible least restrictive environment continuum of service delivery when it comes to APE services. And this was developed by Brad Weiner, who's an adaptive PE supervisor in Fairfax County Public Schools. And As you can see from 1 to 8, there's different descriptions of the least restrictive environment and the delivery of service continuum. So 1 would be students in a regular PE setting. They're not receiving adaptive PE services. They may or may not need accommodations or modifications. Right? And as we're kind of moving up, you can see for number 7, it could be a more individualized setting, depending on the unique needs of the child, and also the eligibility meeting, determining what is the student's least restrictive environment. That could be a one-on-one setting with the adaptive PE teacher and the student. I think also one thing to note is, as much as possible, including the student and student voice, just in terms of their least restrictive environment. And thinking about some students may enjoy being with their peers in a general PE setting. Other students may enjoy a smaller group setting or one-on-one setting. So considering that, and any decision should be data driven, and I think student voice is another important part of that data that I think should be a part of eligibility and also determining the least restrictive environment. All right, so I got 2 more global questions. I know running out of time here, but who provides APE services? So IDEA does stipulate that any individual that is providing special education services, that includes also physical education and also related services, that they need to be adequately and appropriately prepared, trained. They must have the specific content knowledge and skills to serve children with disabilities. They must be certified, endorsed, or licensed in their particular field, their area of expertise, connected to state education codes or state agency credentials. So if we're looking at Virginia, individuals that are providing APE services are those that have an educational license in health and PE. That's the Virginia requirements. Other states may have additional requirements, which I won't get into in today's webinar. But in Virginia, anyone that holds an educational teaching license in health and PE is appropriately and adequately prepared and trained to provide APE services. So a question that might come up is, can a physical therapist or occupational therapist, special education teacher, can they provide APE services? So there's another letter to Garth Tymeson, who asked this particular question, where a school district was having a physical therapist provide APE services. And the short answer is no. That is not in compliance with IDEA. As we talked about, IDEA stipulates and mandates that anyone that's providing services should have the adequate training, should have the expertise, the licensure credentials to provide those services. And a physical therapist doesn't have the appropriate training or preparation to provide APE services. And physical therapy is a related service, which is a support service that benefits the child within special education. And as a reminder, APE is required, special education service, and special design, so it's not a related service. So when it comes to providing these services, an APE teacher, and in Virginia, could be a physical education teacher is providing these services. Not to say that we don't like physical therapists, we don't like occupational therapists, but just thinking about who is the most appropriate and has the content knowledge, the credentials to provide these services. But there is something that we do, and I have done when I was an adaptive PE teacher, but the motor team approach, because we're all working on similar goals when it comes to movement and physical activity, but the adaptive PE teacher, physical therapist, occupational therapist can work collaboratively on goals, which is only going to reinforce and benefit the student when it comes to making progress and ensuring they have access and working towards those standards of learning. All right, so last global question, which is our final point for tonight, is how can I advocate? So these are 4 main things to think about. So just like tonight's webinar, understanding what you and your child's rights are when it comes to physical education. Also when it comes to your child's schools and school district. 1, who is providing physical education or adaptive PE? Are they qualified to provide those services? Something to ask the IEP team. And inquire about how their child is doing in PE. Is there any significant concerns that are occurring that you may not know of? So ask the IEP team, ask the PE teacher, or ask the IEP team to invite the PE teacher to provide that background and that information when it comes to your child's physical education. And also importantly, the IEP is going to be an important document. So making sure that any information about physical education is added onto the IEP, that it is clear that it is a required special education service, and that IEP teams and school districts and public agencies are required to provide that, and not replace it or substitute it or have another individual outside of PE or APE teachers providing that. Recently, I think the past year or so, maybe 2 years or 3 years actually, PEATC collaborated with myself and other individuals in Virginia, where there's a resource document that gives even more information from tonight's webinar about physical education, that breaks it down and provides even more resources. And that QR code will take you to that, and you can do a quick search of PE, Students with Disabilities, PEATC. Really exciting. I had collaborated with Virginia Department of Ed because there was no adaptive PE information on their website. So there is now, if you do a search, you should have something pop up if you do Virginia Adaptive PE, connected to Department of Ed in Virginia. That also has more information about adaptive PE and also has more resources as well to grow your knowledge and to share this with administrators, to share with other parents, other teachers, so they can learn more about adaptive PE. Also, NICPED, which is our national consortium of physical education for individuals with disabilities, they have a load of different resources for parents when it comes to advocating and supporting students and supporting you all when it comes to adaptive PE services. So NICPED had created a sample letter that you can use to send to your school district that requests an evaluation for adaptive PE services. And it outlines everything that we talked about today when it comes to connected to IDEA. PE is required, especially design if necessary. So that QR code would take you to that particular sample letter. And then finally, three more resources. So NICPED had created a checklist specifically for the IEP. So everything I talked about, that checklist will have it there. So as you're going to a meeting, you can bring that checklist and mark off things that the team is discussing or not discussing, and you can bring that up and inquire about it. Also, Nick can also create a document for administrators specifically that is very, very detailed, but it really breaks down things that administrators uh, are required to provide and think about when it comes to physical education and adaptive PE. And then finally, NICPED also created a quick infographic that could be shared with parents or school members, administrators, anybody that's within your community, just to give them more information about adaptive PE. All right, so talked a lot, but this is my email if you ever need to get connected with me. That's my personal cell. If you have a specific question to ask or a situation, I can try my best to help out. If not, I know individuals in Virginia and outside Virginia that can provide support.